Howdy, Tom here. Uh, I don't have any videos on this account, so I'd figure I'd go ahead and make a walkthrough. I just finished installing this about 95% of the way. Only thing I got left is a reservoir bracket. But I'll go ahead and give you a quick walkthrough since Rough Country provides, sorry for the stabilization, I'm not a cameraman. Their instructions are not exactly the best on this, and you will fight it, and you will fight it, and you will fight it. I have a 6-inch lift on this 2015 Toyota Tundra, and I upgraded to the Rough Country Vertex 8-position shocks, coilovers for the front of this vehicle. Now, to do this job, like I said, their instructions are not the best in the world. This is soaked in fluid film because while you're in here, you might as well go ahead and give it a quick rust protection if you're in any rust-prone states. The easiest way I found how to do this, I did the other side yesterday, and the easiest way I found how to do this is go ahead and position your vehicle, jack it up on the frame, preferably by the passenger or driver's side door. Go ahead and take your wheel off, take your tire off, and just let the suspension sit for about 2 or 3 minutes. That way it'll take all the pressure off. It's all hanging down. Okay. Now you're going to want to go ahead and pop that upper ball joint, pop the castle nut off of that. And I know the cotter pin, I ran out of cotter pins, and that was the last one I had. It was a little bit too big, but it'll work for the job. You're going to want to pop that off, back it off till it's got 2 or 3 threads left on it. You're going to want to pop the tie rod off right here. Normally on stock tie rods, I think it's a 22 millimeter, maybe a 24 millimeter nut on the bottom of that castle nut. This one's a 23, it's an aftermarket. This one right here is a 22 millimeter, and if you can't get a wrench in there, you can get a socket in there if it's a shallow well socket, not a deep well. Same thing with that. Go ahead and loosen it up after you take the cotter pin out. Leave a couple threads back on it. Go ahead and Rough Country's instructions that came with mine didn't say anything about this. Go ahead and take that bolt off. That's a 19 millimeter. Take that bolt off of the sway bar link right here, and you can go ahead and take that out, and that'll relieve any little bit of stress holding that up. Do not take these bolts out until the very end, and when you do this on this side, this bracket's gonna sit like this on the upper side. It doesn't say that. There's 2 bolts down here. Don't drop the bolts on the top. Drop the bolts right here, and only take the rear bolt out, because when you take the rear bolt out and loosen the front bolt, you'll be able to slide this in there like so. Then you can bolt it back up. Okay, that's for the shock mount, or for the hydraulic adjustment cylinder, whatever you want to call it. Go ahead and take that nut right there, or that bolt, and that bolt right here. Like I said, I'm sorry, I'm not a cameraman. Go ahead and take those all the way out. That's going to loosen up your brake lines. Now you don't have to take, I got a spacer on the front of this truck. You don't have to take any of the axle nuts off, any of the brake assembly. After you loosen this, take that out, loosen it, do whatever you want. You can then pop it with a hammer right here and preferably if you got a brass hammer. I got one around here somewhere. If you got a brass hammer, use a brass hammer. If not, use a regular hammer. It'll be fine. But that'll pop that loose. That'll pop that upper ball joint loose. Okay. But leaving that nut on it will retain it, making sure that it doesn't pop out. At that point, after you've done that and that, they should be free. I'd go ahead and take that lower castle nut off there, take that tie rod off, then you can set it to the side. Same thing that goes with the top, except when you do the top right here, there's going to be some weight coming off this spindle, or there's going to be some weight coming off this, so I go ahead and support it with a jack underneath like I had, and that'll support the weight of the lower control arm. That way when the weight does come off of this, you don't struggle or get smacked in the face by it. Okay, you can go ahead and wrench that off there real slow after you popped it off. Then it'll tuck up out of the way. If your bushings are good like mine, you're going to have a little bit of trouble. I wouldn't bother loosening any upper bolts to the control arms or loosening any lower bolts to the control arms. You can potentially throw off your alignment if you don't mark them and put the camber bolts back where they need to be. If you do want to do that, that's up to you. I'd mark them on the camber tabs, because these have camber tabs front and back, as you can see in there. Mark them, put them back where you want. I didn't do that. Rough countries, they say all you have to do is loosen that, take the bolts off the top, take the shock bolt out of the bottom, and everything will get in there. It's a little bit more complicated than that. After you've gotten that one off, you got the whole assembly loose. This whole spindle is going to come out and be freely. You can at that point tuck it over to the side, rest it on a block of wood or a little jack if you want, and that'll take some of the weight off. What you want here is you don't want any stress on your brake lines, on any of your ABS sensor lines or anything like that. I didn't have any stress when I let it droop, because it let all this brake line, that's existing brake line that's on here, it let it all flex out of the way. It wasn't a big deal. There wasn't too much pressure on it. At that point, get you some penetrating oil, WD-40, whatnot. You're going to want to spray whatever bolts you have up here. You're going to have 4 bolts. These ones, I think they're stainless hardware. I did not check. But you can go ahead and loosen them. I'd take 3 of them out. What I did was I took 3 of them out. The 4th one I loosened, left about 2 or 3 threads on. Same thing as I did with these, because there's still going to be some tension in your stock coilovers or your aftermarket ones. I had rough country aftermarkets on here. The bushings went bad on the bottom from off-roading a little bit, so I have to do this. It's tearing up my tires at this point. After taking those 3 bolts out, leaving a couple threads on the 4th one, if they're nuts or they're bolts, whatever you have, everybody's a little bit different, I'd go ahead and take that lower shock bolt off. It's going to be pretty long. It's not going to be as long as my fingers, but it's going to be as long as that whole lower control arm right here. You're going to have a nut on the back, 22 millimeter, and the bolt on the front is a 22 millimeter. What I did is I go ahead and popped it loose, and then I hit it with an impact. At that point, you can take the nut off the back all the way, drive it with a brass hammer and a punch, and that'll drive it most of the way through. Then you can put a jack below it still and relieve some of that pressure, and you can eventually wiggle that bolt out. It's kind of a pain in the butt to get out. Once it's all the way out to about that far, you can also give it a couple wrench turns. Beware the threads, don't mess up the threads on it. They are a pain in the butt to find if you're anywhere like I am in rural Missouri. The auto parts store don't have them in stock. Same goes for the top, sorry about that. After you've taken that lower bolt out, most of the pressure is going to be relieved. You got a little bit of pocket in there that shock can go ahead and sit in, so it's not going to fall down anywhere. On the top, you can go ahead and take that fourth bolt off, and that's going to relieve all the little bit of pressure. Okay, at this point you should still have your lower control arm partially jacked up, taking the stress off the lower control arm and any of the components. And at that point, and only that point, after that sway bar links off, that nut's off right here, this other castle nut right here is off, your upper ball joint is disconnected, pulled apart from the spindle right here, lower's disconnected, put off to the side just a hair. After that point, you can go ahead and drop that lower control arm down. This is going to go ahead and open up this upper perch right here, and it's just going to go ahead and drop down. Go ahead and get you a pry bar, cheap Walmart pry bar, and go ahead and pry up. Make sure none of the studs, if you've got studs or if you just got bolts like this one does, make sure they're not catching on any of the holes. And I go ahead and put that pry bar in down here, and you can actually stick it in there. Be careful of this existing mount right here. Don't bend it up too bad. It's Toyota, it's pretty tough, but it's not very big. I think it's only about 3/32 thick. But you can go ahead and pry that out. Stick it in there, pry in an upward motion, and go ahead and pull on it with your right hand or your left hand, however you do it, and it'll pop out. At that point, watch yourself, because whatever struts you got on the front or whatever coilovers you got on the front, you're going to have some weight in there. That's going to want to go straight to the ground. Gravity works like that, people. At that point, your old coilover should be out. You can go ahead and put the new one in. I have the hardest part I had was putting it in the bottom, and since my upper bushings aren't bad, I couldn't get it past this point without prying up. So I put it in the bottom. I went ahead and put that bolt in there and aligned it up. Took that coilover, moved it in, and this is kind of a pain in the butt job right here. But then at that point, I put a pry bar underneath here. Use this pocket on the back side. You'll have a pocket back here. Pried up with my right hand, which pried this whole control arm up. And that'll give you enough space to go ahead and slip that coilover in there, and it'll sit in there just perfect like. At that point, I went ahead and hand tightened some threads, put about 3 or 4 threads in, and then I started bolting it in. The bolts they provided up here, these were a 15 millimeter head on these bolts. Everything on these trucks are metric, okay? So if you ain't got a good set of metric tools, get you a good set of metric tools. They ain't got to be the best thing in the world, but as long as you got metric, you ain't going to be rounding no bolts off. I tightened them in a star pattern. So I went corner to corner, corner to corner, and I went back over them a couple times. Then I went around them, just like doing lug nuts. Because that's going to go ahead and suck up in there, and it's actually going to be pulling this coilover apart as it does it, because it's extending it even further. I bought a spanner wrench to go ahead and adjust this, but they sent me the wrong one, so I'm still waiting on that. But I'm going to go ahead and adjust it manually without the spanner wrench, and all I did was put a punch in here on this top pocket, flicked it over, hammered it a couple times, and that unlocked that top piece right here. I'm going to go ahead and count my threads. And go ahead and adjust it. I'm going to also do the same thing on this bottom here. Spanner wrench is supposed to lock into these small holes right here, but like I said, I ain't got one, so I'm going to get another punch and drift this over slowly and just kind of tighten it that way and extend it on a piece of concrete I got in the backyard over here on a flat ground. When you do that, you're going to want to have the whole vehicle. If you're doing one side, you can do one side at a time just with a jack. All you're going to want to do is take the weight off the suspension. If your wheel's back on, your wheel has to be off the ground, not by much, just enough. That way the whole suspension, the load's taken off it. Then you can tighten it up. I'm going to go ahead and count the threads on this side and match it to the other side. Go about it from there. It's a pretty easy job. If you're mechanically inclined, you can work your way through it. I work in industrial maintenance, so most of the stuff I take apart has no instructions anyway. It's just a kind of a learn as you go process. So something like this, I've done mechanic work and wrenched around since I was about 15 years old. But in my opinion, this is maybe a 4 out of 10 job to actually do. Like I said, the biggest pain in the butt part is going to be actually prying up on that upper control arm. It's not going to do anything to hurt your bushings or anything like that. I would not suggest loosening or removing any of these lower control arm bolts. They don't say to do that on rough country, but when you watch other videos that have the 2.5-inch coilover suspension similar to rough countries, BDS, Fox, etc., they all do it a little bit differently. I do not suggest that. You're gonna, after taking off that sway bar link tie rod, upper ball joint, you're gonna have plenty of room to go ahead and work. Well, that's about it. I just figured I'd make this video to go ahead and help anybody out that had problems with rough country's instructions that they give you. Sorry for all the ums and everything. Thanks for watching. You ain't got to subscribe. I don't put out a bunch of videos, but have a great day. Tom from Northwest Missouri. See you later, guys.